In the shadowed borderlands of Charleston, Ethan, a grieving father, abandons his 12-month-old twin daughters, Eliza and Ella, with a desperate plea for their future. Haunted by his wife Amira's death and crushed by poverty, he believes it's their only chance. 3 months later, he's stunned to find them thriving in the mansion of Cuban magnate Mercedes del Toro. As secrets unravel, Amira's suspicious death, a vengeful family feud, and threats to the twins, Ethan vows to protect his girls and redeem his past. The Charleston market pulsed with life under a bruised twilight sky, its cobblestone paths weaving through stalls fragrant with sweetgrass and sizzling shrimp. Ethan Caldwell pushed a double stroller through the crowd, his knuckles white against the worn plastic handles, his heart hammering like a trapped bird. The air buzzed, vendors hawked woven baskets, tourists laughed over pralines. But Ethan was a ghost among them. His world narrowed to the two tiny souls in his care. Eliza, 12 months old, her fair skin glowing like porcelain, clutched a rattle with chubby fingers, her blonde curls catching the last rays of sun. Ella, her twin, her rich brown skin mirroring their late mother Amira's, gummed a teething ring, her dark eyes wide and curious. They were miracles, these girls, born of a love that had defied the world's sharp edges. But tonight, Ethan was about to betray them. His boots scuffed the stones as he maneuvered past a fiddler playing a mournful tune, the notes curling around his chest like smoke. Amira's face flashed in his mind, her wide smile, her laugh that could coax light from the darkest days. She'd been his anchor, a black woman whose strength had steadied his working-class, white roots. They'd built a life in Charleston's gritty corners, dreaming of a future for their girls. But Amira's death, a brutal hemorrhage during childbirth, had shattered that dream. The hospital's cold explanations, complications rare, unavoidable, did nothing to dull the ache. Ethan had been left alone, a widower at 29, with two infants and a life unraveling faster than he could grasp. The market's noise faded as he steered toward the borderlands, a quieter stretch where the stalls thinned and shadows pooled. His breath hitched, ragged and uneven. 3 months without steady work, his mechanic shop had shuttered when the owner fled town with the payroll. The landlord's eviction notice was taped to his door, the ink stark against the peeling paint. His kitchen cabinets gaped empty, and the social worker's voice echoed in his skull. "Your situation is unstable, Mr. Caldwell. Foster care is likely. The twins may be placed separately. Different adoptive preferences, you understand? Separate." The word was a blade, slicing through the last of his resolve. Eliza and Ella torn apart, their bonds severed by a system that saw them as files, not sisters. He couldn't let that happen. But what could he offer? A one-room apartment with no heat? A father drowning in grief? "This is the only way," he whispered, the lie bitter on his tongue. His eyes stung as he glanced at the girls. Eliza babbled softly, her rattle clinking, while Ella kicked her tiny legs, oblivious to the storm raging in her father's heart. They were so different. Eliza's fair complexion, a mirror of his own. Ella's deep brown, a gift from Amira's lineage. Yet their bond was unbreakable, a silent language of glances and touches. He'd once marveled at their rare genetic dance, a testament to the love that had created them. Now their differences only underscored his failure. What kind of father leaves his children? The question clawed at him, but desperation had a way of silencing shame. He stopped at a weathered bench near the market's edge, a spot he and Amira had claimed years ago. They'd sat here, her head on his shoulder, planning a life that now felt like a cruel mirage. The bench faced a quiet alley, the market's clamor muffled by distance. It was perfect, visible enough for someone to notice the girls, secluded enough to give him time to vanish. His hands trembled as he unbuckled the stroller's straps, lifting Eliza first. She cooed, her warmth a dagger to his chest. He set her on the bench, tucking her blanket around her. Ella followed, her teething ring falling to the ground. He retrieved it, wiping it on his sleeve, and placed it in her tiny hand. "You're so strong," he murmured, his voice cracking. "Just like your mama." From his jacket pocket, he pulled a folded letter, the paper creased from hours of rewriting. "Their names are Eliza and Ella. Their mother is gone. I can't provide for them. Please give them a home. Call my sister Lena at phone number. The words were a confession, a plea, a surrender. He tucked the letter into the blanket between them, securing it against the evening breeze. His fingers lingered on the paper, as if it could hold the weight of his love. He imagined someone finding them, a kind vendor, a wealthy tourist, anyone with the means to give them what he couldn't. A family with a warm house, full pantries, and a future. Not a broken man with nothing but regrets. The market's lights twinkled in the distance, a cruel contrast to the darkness swallowing him. He knelt before the girls, his breath hitching. "I love you," he whispered, kissing Eliza's forehead, then Ella's. Their skin was soft, warm, and alive. "Someone will find you, someone better." The lie choked him, but he forced himself to stand. His legs felt like lead, each step away from the bench a battle against instinct. He glanced back once. Eliza waved her rattle. Ella tilted her head, their eyes following him. He turned away, tears streaming, and plunged into the alley shadows. The walk to his battered pickup was torture. Every sound, a child's laugh, a vendor's shout, felt like a summons to return. He climbed into the cab, slamming the door and gripped the steering wheel until his hands ached. The engine sputtered to life, its rumble drowning out the market's fading pulse. He drove toward his apartment, the city blurring through his tears. Guilt gnawed at him, a beast he couldn't outrun. He'd abandoned his daughters, left them to fate's mercy. What if no one came? What if they cried for him in the dark? The questions spun, relentless, but he pushed them down. He had to believe they'd be safe. He had to believe he'd done the right thing. As the truck rattled through Charleston streets, Ethan's mind replayed Amira's final moments. Her hand squeezing his, her whispered, "Take care of our girls." He'd failed her, failed them. The letter was his last act of hope, a fragile bridge to a better life for Eliza and Ella. But as he parked outside his crumbling building, the weight of his choice settled like a stone. He collapsed onto his mattress, still in his jacket, and stared at the ceiling. The expected relief never came, only a hollow ache and the echo of 2 tiny heartbeats he'd left behind. The Charleston market exhaled its last breath as twilight bled into night, the cobblestone paths now shadowed and still. The vendors had packed their sweetgrass baskets, the tourists drifted to waterfront bars, and the fiddler's mournful tune had long faded. Only a weathered bench near the market's edge held vigil, cradling 2 tiny figures in a double stroller. Eliza, 12 months old, her fair skin pale under the dim street lamp, clutched her rattle, its clink a faint protest against the quiet. Ella, her brown skin rich even in the dark, stirred restlessly, her teething ring abandoned in her lap. The letter tucked between them fluttered in the evening breeze, its words a silent cry. Their names are Eliza and Ella. Their mother is gone. I can't provide for them. Please give them a home. The market was empty now, save for one figure, a woman whose presence seemed to shift the air itself. Mercedes del Toro moved through the market's borderlands with the grace of someone who commanded rooms, her silk dress whispering against the stones, her silver-streaked hair catching the lamplight like a crown. At 68, she was a Cuban-American magnate, her real estate empire a cornerstone of Charleston's skyline. But tonight she was unmoored, her driver idling nearby as she wandered, seeking solace after a gala that had left her hollow. Her daughter Sophia, lost to a car accident a decade ago, haunted her steps. The market, with its pulse of life, had always been Sophia's favorite place, a refuge Mercedes now sought alone. Her heels clicked softly as she neared the bench, then stopped. A small whimper, almost lost in the night, pierced her reverie. Ella's tiny hand reached for Eliza, who babbled in confusion, their blanket askew. Mercedes froze, her breath catching. The stroller, worn but sturdy, stood abandoned, a relic of care now discarded. She knelt, her knees brushing the cold cobblestones, and peered at the girls. Eliza's blue eyes met hers, wide and trusting, while Ella's dark ones held a quiet intensity, as if measuring her. "Dios mío," Mercedes murmured, her voice thick with a grief she rarely let surface. The letter, half fallen to the ground, caught her eye. She retrieved it, her manicured fingers trembling as she unfolded the paper. The words hit like a tide. Their mother is gone. I can't provide for them. A father's desperation, raw and unguarded, spilled across the page. The phone number for a sister named Lena stared back, a lifeline Mercedes wasn't ready to pull. Not yet. Her gaze returned to the twins, their differences striking yet harmonious. Eliza's blonde curls a stark contrast to Ella's tight, dark ones, their skin a testament to a love that bridged worlds. They were so small, so vulnerable, left to the mercy of a city that could be cruel. Mercedes' heart clenched, a memory surfacing. Sophia at their Cuban farm, laughing as she chased fireflies. Her life cut short before she could become a mother. These girls alone in the dark felt like a second chance, a sign woven into the fabric of this night. But doubt gnawed at her. Could she, a woman hardened by boardrooms and loss, be what they needed? Ella whimpered again, her tiny face crumpling, and Eliza echoed her, their cries twining in the stillness. Mercedes acted on instinct, shedding her shawl to wrap it around them, its silk soft against their blankets. Shh, pequeños, she whispered, her Spanish a lullaby from her own childhood. She straightened, scanning the empty market. No one lingered, no frantic parent rushed forward. The girls had been left to fate, and fate had brought them here. She pulled out her phone, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. Carlos, bring the car to the west entrance. Now! Her driver's response was immediate, the Bentley's engine a low hum as it approached. Mercedes lifted Eliza first, her warmth a shock against the night's chill. The baby nestled into her shoulder, quieting as if sensing safety. Ella followed, her small body tense but yielding. Mercedes held them close, their weight grounding her. The letter, now tucked into her purse, felt like a contract, a promise she hadn't yet named. Carlos, a burly man with kind eyes, opened the Bentley's door, his brow furrowing at the sight. Senora, should I call the police? He asked, glancing at the stroller. Mercedes hesitated. The authorities would mean foster care, bureaucracy, and separation. She shook her head. Not yet. Take us home. The drive to her Ashley River mansion was a blur, the city's lights streaking past like falling stars. In the back seat, Mercedes cradled the twins, their cries softening to hiccups. The mansion loomed ahead, its wrought iron gates parting to reveal a sprawl of live oaks and marble. Inside, the grand foyer gleamed, but Mercedes bypassed its opulence, heading for a guest room she hadn't touched since Sophia's death. She laid the girls on a velvet chaise, their blankets a patchwork of market dust and hope. Her housekeeper Maria appeared, her gasp echoing in the silence. Madre de Dios, where did they come from? Mercedes recounted the night, her voice low. Call Dr. Alvarez for a checkup, and find a nanny by morning. As Maria bustled off, Mercedes sat beside the twins, watching them drift to sleep. Eliza's rattle lay forgotten, and Ella's hand curled around her sister's. The letter burned in her mind. Please give them a home. She'd built an empire, faced down rivals and buried her grief. But this was different. These girls needed more than wealth. They needed love, stability, and a mother. Could she be that? The question lingered as she dialed her lawyer, her tone clipped. File for emergency fostering. I want it legal by dawn. Hanging up, she looked at the twins, their breaths soft and steady. You're safe now, she whispered, though their sleeping faces couldn't hear the vow. The night deepened, the mansion's silence broken only by the river's distant murmur. Mercedes stood, her shawl draped over the girls like a shield. She didn't know their father, their story, or what tomorrow would bring. But as she watched Eliza and Ella sleep, their hands touching even in dreams, she felt something shift, a purpose, fragile but fierce, taking root. The market had given her a gift, and she would not let it go. The Charleston sun hung low, painting the historic district in hues of amber and gold. But Ethan Caldwell felt only the weight of his guilt. 3 months had passed since he'd left his twin daughters, Eliza and Ella, at the Charleston market, their tiny forms haunting his every waking moment. Now he pushed a delivery cart through the city's cobblestone streets, the clatter of wheels a dull echo of his fractured life. His mechanic's hands, once steady, trembled under the strain of odd jobs, delivery runs, dishwashing, anything to keep the lights on in his crumbling apartment. Each day was a penance, each night a torment of what-ifs. He'd race back to the market at dawn, heart pounding, only to find the stroller gone, the bench empty. The police had been dismissive. A father who'd abandoned his children was no victim in their eyes. His sister Lena had heard nothing from the number he'd left in the letter. Ethan was a ghost, drifting through a city that no longer felt like home. Today's delivery brought him to a gated estate on the Ashley River, its wrought iron entrance framed by ancient live oaks dripping with Spanish moss. The mansion loomed beyond, a testament to wealth carved in marble and glass. Ethan adjusted his faded cap, wiping sweat from his brow, and rang the bell. He expected a housekeeper, perhaps a groundskeeper, to sign for the package. A crate of imported tiles, heavy enough to make his shoulders ache. Instead, the door swung open, revealing a woman whose presence seemed to command the very air. Mercedes Del Toro, her silk blouse pristine, her silver-streaked hair pulled into an elegant chignon, fixed him with a gaze that pierced through his worn delivery uniform. "You're early," she said, her voice smooth but edged, like a blade wrapped in velvet. Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but a sound from within the mansion stole his breath, a child's giggle, bright and achingly familiar. He leaned past Mercedes, his eyes darting to the sunlit parlor beyond. There, on a Persian rug strewn with wooden blocks, sat two toddlers. Eliza, her blonde curls bouncing, stacked a tower with fierce concentration, her fair skin glowing in the morning light. Ella, her brown skin rich and warm, clapped her hands, her dark eyes sparkling as the tower wobbled. "My girls," Ethan gasped, the crate slipping from his hands. It hit the marble stoop with a thud, the sound swallowed by the roar in his ears. His legs buckled, and he gripped the doorframe, his vision blurring with tears. Mercedes' eyes narrowed, her posture stiffening. "You're their father?" The question was a scalpel, cutting through the haze of his shock. Ethan nodded, words failing him as he stared at his daughters. Alive, thriving, in a world of opulence he could never have imagined. "How?" he managed, his voice raw. Mercedes stepped aside, gesturing for him to enter. "Leave the crate, we need to talk." Her tone brooked no argument, and Ethan followed, his boots scuffing the polished floor, each step a plunge into a reality he couldn't grasp. She led him to a study, its mahogany bookshelves lined with leather-bound volumes, a Cuban cigar box gleaming on a side table. A window overlooked the river, its waters glinting like a promise. Mercedes closed the door, the click loud in the silence, and motioned to a leather chair. Ethan remained standing, his gaze drawn to a framed photo on her desk, Eliza and Ella in matching sundresses, laughing at a riverfront picnic. "They're mine," he whispered, more to himself than to her. "I left them. I thought—" His voice broke, and he sank into the chair, burying his face in his hands. Mercedes sat across from him, her expression unreadable. "I found them that night at the market," she said, her voice steady but laced with something deeper. Grief, perhaps, or resolve. "Abandoned, with your letter. I've legally fostered them. An adoption is pending. They're thriving here." She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto his. "Explain yourself, Mr. Caldwell. Why did you leave them to the night?" Ethan's story poured out, a torrent of pain and shame. Amira's death in childbirth, the hospital's cold dismissal, his job loss, the eviction notice, the social worker's warning that foster care would split the twins. "I was drowning," he said, his voice hoarse. "I thought someone would find them. Someone with a real home, a future. I went back at dawn, but they were gone. I've been searching ever since." Tears tracked down his cheeks, but he didn't wipe them away. "I was wrong. I know that now." Mercedes listened, her fingers steepled, her face a mask of calculation. When he finished, she stood, pacing to the window. "Your mother, Claire, worked for me years ago," she said, the revelation landing like a stone in still water. "She was my secretary, sharp and kind. She spoke of you before she died, her boy, her pride. She'd be ashamed of what you did, but I see her in you now. Regret, not malice." Ethan's breath caught. His mother, gone when he was a child, had always been a shadow in his memory, her face blurred by time. "You knew her?" he asked, stunned. "Yes," Mercedes said, turning to face him. "And because of her, I'm giving you a chance." She crossed her arms, her gaze unrelenting. "A job at my company, logistics assistant, a room in the guest cottage, supervised visits with the girls. But hear me clearly, Ethan. If you betray their trust again, you're gone. No second chances." Her words were a lifeline and a warning, woven together with the precision of a woman who'd built an empire. Ethan's heart surged, hope battling the guilt that still clawed at him. "I'll do anything," he said, his voice steady for the first time. "They're my daughters. I'll prove I'm their father." Mercedes studied him, then nodded once, a decision made. "Good. Start tomorrow. For now, go. The girls need their nap." She opened the door, but Ethan hesitated, glancing toward the parlor. "Can I see them, just for a moment?" Mercedes's expression softened, a flicker of understanding passing through her eyes. "Not today," she said gently. "They don't know you yet, but soon." Ethan nodded, the ache in his chest both sharper and lighter. As he stepped onto the stoop, the crate still waiting, he looked back at the mansion, its windows glowing with a life his daughters now lived. He'd failed them once, but Mercedes del Toro had given him a path back. He would walk it, no matter how steep, for Eliza and Ella. The Ashley River shimmered under a late summer moon, its waters a silver thread weaving through the grounds of Mercedes del Toro's Charleston estate. Ethan Caldwell stood on the porch of the guest cottage, a modest clapboard haven tucked behind the mansion's grandeur. His hands, rough from years as a mechanic, gripped the railing, the wood cool against his palms. 3 months ago, he'd abandoned his twin daughters, Eliza and Ella, at the Charleston market, a decision that still clawed at his dreams. Now, by some miracle woven through Mercedes's mercy, he was here, a logistics assistant in her real estate empire, a tenant in her world, and, most improbably, a father again, if only in stolen moments. The air smelled of magnolias and river silt, but beneath the night's calm, Ethan felt a current of unease, as if the estate's live oaks whispered warnings he couldn't yet decipher. Inside the cottage, his new life was taking shape. A single bed, a desk piled with logistics manuals, a photo of Amira, her smile radiant, her dark eyes alive, propped against a cracked mug. Ethan had moved in that morning, his meager belongings dwarfed by the space. Mercedes's offer was a lifeline, a job, a place to live, and supervised visits with the twins. But her warning echoed, "Betray their trust again, and you're gone." He'd nodded, his resolve ironclad, but the weight of proving himself pressed harder each day. He was a stranger to his daughters now, their laughter a gift he had to earn. His first visit came at noon, under the watchful eye of Maria, the housekeeper. In the mansion's garden, a riot of azaleas and jasmine, Eliza toddled toward him, her blonde curls bouncing, her fair skin flushed with delight. "Tick," she squealed, remembering his tickling game from a life that felt like a dream. Ethan knelt, his throat tight, and swept her into his arms, her giggle a balm to his guilt. Ella, her brown skin glowing in the sunlight, hung back, clinging to Mercedes' silk skirt. "Abuela," she murmured, her dark eyes wary, studying Ethan like a puzzle she wasn't ready to solve. Mercedes, regal in a linen dress, gave a small nod. "She's cautious," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Give her time." Ethan nodded, his heart aching, but grateful for the chance to try. Days blurred into a rhythm of work and visits. At Del Toro Properties, Ethan tracked shipments and coordinated schedules, his quick mind earning grudging respect from colleagues. The job was a world away from grease-stained garages, but he thrived on its demands, driven by the need to be worthy of his girls. Afternoons brought moments in the garden or the mansion's playroom, where Eliza's fearless chatter, "Da, look, blocks," mingled with Ella's quiet observation. Slowly Ella warmed, offering a shy smile when Ethan built a tower for her to topple. Each laugh, each tentative touch, was a brick in the bridge he was rebuilding, fragile but growing stronger. Yet shadows lingered. Strange cars idled beyond the estate's gates, their tinted windows glinting in the dusk. Security guards, ever present, tightened their patrols, their radios crackling with clipped updates. Ethan noticed Mercedes's tension, her sharp glances toward the river, her hushed calls late at night. He didn't ask, not yet, but the air felt charged, like the calm before a low-country storm. His instincts, honed by years scraping by, whispered of danger, but his focus remained on the twins, their safety his anchor. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan sat with the girls in the garden, reading from a worn copy of Goodnight Moon. Eliza nestled against his chest, her rattle forgotten, while Ella perched on a blanket, her fingers tracing the book's pages. The air was thick with the hum of cicadas, the river's murmur a distant lullaby. Ethan's voice was low, steady, each word a promise to be present. Good night, stars. Good night, air. He didn't see the figure at first, a shadow slipping through the azalea hedge, silent as a predator. But Ella's gasp, sharp and sudden, snapped him alert. Daddy, she cried, her voice a blade of fear. Ethan spun, heart lurching, as a masked figure lunged from the darkness, gloved hands reaching for Ella. Time slowed, the world narrowing to his daughter's wide eyes. Ethan surged forward, dropping the book, and tackled the intruder, his shoulder slamming into a wiry frame. They hit the ground hard, gravel biting into Ethan's knees. Ella screamed, scrambling to Eliza, who wailed in confusion. The figure thrashed, a knife glinting in their hand. But Ethan pinned their wrist, his strength fueled by a father's desperation. Get away from her! He roared, his voice raw. Footsteps pounded. Security guards, drawn by the commotion, flooded the garden, their flashlights slicing through the dusk. The intruder twisted free, bolting toward the river, but not before Ethan caught a glimpse of a tattoo on their neck, a jagged crescent moon. Guards gave chase, their shouts fading into the night. Ethan crawled to the twins, gathering them in his arms. Eliza sobbed into his shirt. Ella clung to his neck, her small body trembling. It's okay, he whispered, though his pulse thundered. I've got you. Mercedes appeared, her face pale but composed, a phone already at her ear. Lock the gates, she snapped to a guard, then knelt beside the twins, her silk dress pooling on the grass. Are they hurt? Her voice trembled, betraying the fear beneath her steel. Ethan shook his head, his arms tight around the girls. They're safe. But who was that? Mercedes's eyes met his, dark with secrets. Not here, she said, standing. Inside. Now. In the mansion's library, with the twins calmed by Maria and a warm bottle, Mercedes faced Ethan, her posture rigid. That was no random thief, she said, her voice low. I have enemies, Ethan. The Kingsley family. Charleston elites. We've clashed over land, power, for decades. She crossed to a window, the river beyond a black mirror. They know the twins are my weakness now. This was a warning. Ethan's mind raced, the crescent moon tattoo burning in his memory. A warning for what? He pressed, his voice hard. Mercedes turned, her gaze piercing. For things you don't yet understand, but you're part of this now. For the girls, we stay vigilant. Ethan nodded, his resolve of fire kindled by Ella's cry. He'd failed them once, but never again. As he left the library, the twins' laughter faint behind a closed door, he felt the weight of a new fight, one not just for their love, but for their lives. The river whispered outside, and Ethan swore he'd face whatever shadows it hid. The Ashley River estate lay cloaked in the hush of pre-dawn, its live oaks standing sentinel under a sky bruised with stars. Inside Mercedes Del Toro's mansion, the library glowed with the flicker of a single lamp, its light carving shadows across mahogany shelves and Cuban artifacts. Ethan Caldwell stood by the window, the river's dark mirror reflecting his own turmoil. The attempted kidnapping of his daughter Ella 3 days ago had shattered the fragile peace he'd begun to build. His twins, Eliza and Ella, now slept in the mansion's nursery under armed guard, their laughter silenced by the threat that lingered like smoke. Ethan's hands, still calloused from his mechanic days, clenched at his sides. The crescent moon tattoo on the intruder's neck burned in his memory, a clue to a danger he couldn't yet name. Mercedes had promised answers, and tonight she would deliver. He, The heavy oak door creaked open, and Mercedes entered, her silk robe a whisper against the floor, her silver-streaked hair loose for the first time Ethan had seen. She carried a leather-bound notebook, its edges worn, and set it on the table with a reverence that made Ethan's pulse quicken. "Sit," she said, her voice low but commanding, a general marshaling her forces. Ethan obeyed, his chair scraping against the polished wood, his eyes fixed on the notebook. "What's that?" he asked, his voice rough with sleepless nights and unspoken fears. Mercedes's gaze met his, dark and unyielding, but beneath her steel, Ethan glimpsed a fracture. Grief, perhaps, or guilt. "This," she said, tapping the notebook, "belonged to Amira." The name struck Ethan like a physical blow, conjuring his late wife's face, her radiant smile, her dark eyes fierce with purpose. Amira, gone too soon in childbirth, had been his anchor, her love a defiance of the world's sharp edges. The hospital's cold verdict, complications unavoidable, had haunted him, but he'd accepted it, too broken to question. Now doubt flared, hot and sharp. "What do you mean?" he demanded, leaning forward, his hands gripping the table's edge. Mercedes sat across from him, her posture regal despite the hour. "Amira's death wasn't just a tragedy," she said, her words deliberate, each one a stone dropped into still water. "She was investigating the Kingsley family, Charleston's untouchable elites, for a local paper. I funded her work." Ethan's breath caught, his mind reeling. The Kingsleys, Mercedes' enemies, had been named after Ella's attack, their shadow looming over the estate. "Investigating what?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mercedes opened the notebook, revealing Amira's neat handwriting. Dates, names, figures scrawled in urgent ink. "The Kingsleys built their empire on fraud," she said, her finger tracing a page. "Forged deeds, bribed officials, land stolen from families like mine. Amira uncovered their network piece by piece. She came to me for resources, access to records, contacts. I gave her everything, not just for justice, but because she reminded me of my daughter, Sophia." Her voice softened, a rare crack in her armor, but she pressed on. "The Kingsleys found out. I believe they pressured the hospital during her delivery. Her care was rushed, mismanaged, deliberately so." Ethan's world tilted, rage and grief colliding in his chest. "You're saying they killed her?" The words tore from him, raw and jagged. He stood, pacing to the window, the river's calm mocking his storm. Amira, his fierce, brilliant Amira, murdered for her courage? The thought was a knife, twisting deeper with every heartbeat. "Why didn't you tell me?" he demanded, turning to face Mercedes, his fist clenched. "You knew her, worked with her, and you let me believe it was just chance?" Mercedes' eyes flashed, but her voice remained steady. "You were drowning, Ethan. Amira told me about you. Her mechanic, her heart, struggling to keep your family afloat. When she died, I tried to find you, but you'd vanished into your grief. Then I found the twins, and my focus became them." She rose, crossing to him, the notebook still open on the table. "I'm telling you now because Ella's attack changes everything. The Kingsleys know the twins are my weakness and yours. Their leverage." Ethan's gaze fell to the notebook, Amira's words a lifeline across the void of her absence. He returned to the table, his fingers brushing the pages, lists of properties, coded initials, a sketch of a crescent moon. His breath hitched. "The tattoo," he said, pointing to the drawing. "The man who tried to take Ella had this on his neck." Mercedes nodded, her expression grim. "A Kingsley enforcer. They've used that mark for decades, a signature for their dirty work." The room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in with the weight of truth. Ethan sank back into the chair, his mind racing. Amira had died for this notebook, for the secrets it held, and now his daughters were targets because of it. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice steadier now, fueled by a father's resolve. Mercedes closed the notebook, her hands steady. "We fight, but we need proof. Hard evidence to bring the Kingsleys down. I have investigators, but you knew Amira best. Her notes, her instincts, they're your map." Ethan nodded, the fire of Amira's courage kindling in him, but he couldn't do it alone. I need Lena, he said, thinking of his sister, the only family he had left. Lena, a paralegal with a sharp mind, had reconnected after learning the twins were safe. She's good with research, records. She'll help. Mercedes' lips curved, a rare hint of approval. Call her, but be discreet. The Kingsleys have eyes everywhere. As dawn broke, painting the river in shades of rose and gold, Ethan stepped onto the cottage porch, Amira's notebook tucked under his arm. He dialed Lena, his voice urgent but low. I need you in Charleston, he said when she answered, groggy but alert. It's about Amira. She didn't just die, Lena. She was targeted. Lena's silence was heavy then. I'm on the next flight. Hanging up, Ethan looked toward the mansion, where Eliza and Ella slept, unaware of the storm gathering around them. The river murmured, its secrets older than the city itself. Ethan gripped the notebook, Amira's legacy now his burden. The Kingsleys had taken his wife, threatened his daughters, but they wouldn't win. For Eliza, for Ella, for the woman who'd loved him through the dark, he'd finish what Amira started. The fight was just beginning, and Ethan Caldwell was ready. The Charleston night pressed against the guest cottage like a held breath, its walls bathed in the Ashley River's ghostly shimmer. Ethan Caldwell lay awake, Amira's notebook open on his chest, its pages a map of secrets that had cost his wife her life. The crescent moon tattoo, sketched in her urgent hand, haunted him, a mark tying the Kingsley family to the attempted kidnapping of his daughter Ella. His twins, Eliza and Ella, slept in the mansion's nursery under Mercedes Del Toro's watchful guard. But safety felt like a fragile illusion. Ethan's fingers traced Amira's words, her courage afire in his veins. Lena, his sister, was due to arrive tomorrow, her paralegal skills a weapon against the Kingsleys' empire of fraud. But as the clock ticked past midnight, a new threat was already igniting, its first sparks hidden in the cottage's shadows. Ethan's eyes drifted shut, exhaustion pulling him under, when a sharp crack snapped him awake. The air stung with the acrid bite of smoke, curling through the room like a predator. He bolted upright, the notebook tumbling to the floor. Orange light flickered beyond the window, licking the cottage's clapboard walls. Fire, he rasped, his heart lurching. The twins. They were in the mansion, but the flames were a warning, a strike at the heart of his new beginning. He yanked on his boots, grabbing Amira's notebook and shoving it into his jacket. The door was warm under his palm, the heat pulsing like a living thing. He flung it open, smoke billowing in, and sprinted toward the mansion, the river's cool breath a cruel contrast to the inferno at his back. The cottage blazed behind him, flames devouring the porch where he'd stood hours ago, dreaming of his daughter's laughter. Security guards swarmed the lawn, their radios crackling, hoses already snaking from the estate's pump. Ethan didn't stop, his boots pounding the gravel path to the mansion's rear entrance. The nursery was on the second floor, its windows dark but untouched by fire. He burst through the door, shouting, Eliza! Ella! Maria, the housekeeper, met him in the foyer, her face pale. They're safe upstairs with the nanny, she gasped. But Ethan pushed past, taking the marble stairs two at a time. His lungs burned, not from smoke but fear, the memory of Ella's cry during the kidnapping, a whip driving him forward. In the nursery, the twins slept in matching cribs, their faces serene under a mobile of glowing stars. The nanny, a young woman named Clara, stood guard, her eyes wide but steady. They're okay, she whispered, but Ethan checked each girl, his hands trembling as he touched their warm cheeks. Eliza stirred, her blonde curls damp with sweat, while Ella murmured, her brown skin soft under his fingers. He scooped them up, blankets and all, their weight grounding him. We're leaving, he told Clara, his voice low. Now. The fire was contained to the cottage, but Ethan trusted nothing. Not the guards, not the night. Mercedes met them in the grand foyer, her silk robe traded for a tailored coat, her silver hair pulled tight. The fire's out, she said, her voice clipped, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of dread. Arson. My investigators found accelerant traces. Ethan's grip tightened on the twins, Eliza nuzzling his shoulder, Ella blinking awake. Kingsleys? He asked, the name a curse. Mercedes nodded, her jaw set. Likely. They're tightening the noose. She gestured to a guard. Take the girls to the safe room. Ethan hesitated, reluctant to let them go, but Clara stepped forward, her arms open. I'll stay with them, she promised. Ethan relented, kissing each girl's forehead before handing them over, his heart twisting as they disappeared down a guarded hall. Mercedes led him to the library where a laptop glowed with security footage. Grainy images showed a figure splashing liquid on the cottage's walls, the crescent moon tattoo stark on their neck. Same mark, Ethan said, rage simmering. They want us scared. Mercedes' eyes narrowed. They want us dead, but we're not prey. She closed the laptop, her voice steel. Lena's coming. Use her. Find the proof in Amira's notes. I'll handle the Kingsleys my way. Ethan nodded, but doubt gnawed at him. The Kingsleys weren't just a family. They were a machine, oiled with wealth and influence. Could he outmaneuver them? The answer came 2 nights later at a Charleston gala, a glittering affair in a waterfront ballroom. Mercedes had insisted Ethan attend, a chance to observe their enemy. Dressed in a borrowed suit, Ethan felt like an imposter among the city's elite, their diamonds and laughter a world apart from his calloused hands. Lena, newly arrived, stood beside him, her paralegal poise masking her fury over Amira's death. We've got a lead, she whispered, slipping him a note. A Kingsley accountant, ready to talk. Ethan tucked it away, his eyes scanning the crowd until they locked on Preston Kingsley, the family patriarch. Tall, silver-haired, his smirk radiated untouchable power. Ethan's blood boiled, Amira's notebook heavy in his memory. He crossed the room, ignoring Lena's warning hiss. Kingsley, he said, his voice low but steady. Preston turned, his eyes glinting with amusement. The delivery boy, he drawled, sipping champagne. Out of your depth, aren't you? Ethan stepped closer, his fist clenched. You burned my home. You tried to take my daughter. Why? Preston's smirk widened, unperturbed. You're in over your head, Caldwell. Those girls belong to Charleston's history, not you. Walk away, or you'll lose more than a cottage. The threat hung like a blade, but Ethan held his ground, Amira's courage in his spine. I'm not walking anywhere, he said, his voice a growl. You'll answer for Amira. Preston's eyes flickered, a crack in his facade, but he turned away, melting into the crowd. Lena grabbed Ethan's arm, pulling him back. Not here, she hissed. We need the accountant's evidence, not a fistfight. Ethan nodded, his pulse still racing, but Preston's words echoed. Those girls belong to Charleston's history. The Kingsleys saw Eliza and Ella as pawns in a game Ethan was only beginning to understand. Back at the estate, Ethan sat with Lena in the guest wing, Amira's notebook open between them. The accountant's name, Harold Vance, promised a breakthrough, his files detailing Kingsley bribes. Mercedes joined them, her face grim. Vance is scared, she said, but he'll meet you tomorrow in secret. Be ready. Ethan looked out at the river, its surface deceptively calm. The Kingsleys had taken Amira, nearly taken Ella, burned his home. But they had underestimated him. For his daughters, he'd tear their empire down, brick by brick. The Charleston courthouse stood like a monument to truth, its limestone facade glowing under a merciless summer sun. But inside, the air was thick with tension. Ethan Caldwell sat in the gallery, his calloused hands clasped tightly, the weight of Amira's notebook a phantom in his chest. The past weeks had been a crucible, Ella's near kidnapping, the arson that consumed his guest cottage, Preston Kingsley's chilling threat at the gala. Now the fight for justice had brought Ethan, Mercedes Del Toro, and his sister Lena to this courtroom, where the Kingsley empire would face its reckoning. Ethan's twins, Eliza and Ella, were safe at the Ashley River estate, guarded by Mercedes' security, but their future hung in the balance. The river's whisper, a constant in Ethan's dreams, seemed to echo here, urging him to finish what Amira had started. The courtroom buzzed, reporters scribbling, spectators murmuring as the judge, a stern woman with gray-streaked hair, called the session to order. Ethan's borrowed suit itched, a stark contrast to the tailored elegance of Mercedes, who sat beside him, her silver hair gleaming like a crown. Lena, sharp in a navy blazer, stood with their legal team, her paralegal precision honed for this moment. Across the aisle, Preston Kingsley lounged, his silver hair slicked back, his smirk a challenge. The sight ignited Ethan's rage, but he held it in check, Amira's courage steadying him. Her notebook, its pages of forged deeds, bribed officials, and the crescent moon sketch, had led them here, and today it would speak. The prosecution opened with a thunderclap, presenting Amira's notes as evidence of the Kingsley family's decades-long fraud. Lena had worked tirelessly with Mercedes investigators, cross-referencing Amira's findings with public records. The notebook detailed stolen land, including parcels once owned by Mercedes's Cuban ancestors, and payoffs to city officials. The crescent moon symbol, a Kingsley enforcer's mark, tied the family to the cottage arson and Ella's attempted abduction. Ethan watched as Lena handed the notebook to the prosecutor, her hands steady despite the weight of eyes on her. Amira Caldwell risked everything to expose this, the prosecutor declared, holding the notebook aloft. And she paid with her life. The bombshell came next. Hospital records from Amira's delivery, uncovered by Lena's relentless digging. Discrepancies in staffing, rushed procedures, and a nurse's hushed testimony suggested interference. The Kingsleys pressured the hospital, the prosecutor argued, pointing to Preston. They silenced a journalist who threatened their empire. Ethan's breath caught, the memory of Amira's final moments. Her hand weak in his, her whispered, "Take care of our girls," cutting deeper with the truth. Preston's smirk faltered, a crack in his untouchable facade, but he leaned to his lawyer, unruffled. Ethan's fists clenched, but Mercedes's hand on his arm anchored him. "Patience," she murmured, her voice steel-wrapped in silk. The turning point was Harold Vance. The Kingsley accountant Ethan and Lena had met in secret. Vance took the stand, his face pale, his hands trembling as he clutched a thumb drive. Under oath, he detailed years of cooked books, wire transfers to offshore accounts, and orders from Preston himself. "They called it cleaning the slate," Vance said, his voice quavering. "Anyone who got too close, like Amira Caldwell, was dealt with." The thumb drive handed to the judge contained ledgers corroborating Amira's notes. The courtroom erupted, reporters scrambling, Preston's lawyer objecting furiously. Ethan's heart pounded, a mix of triumph and grief. Amira's work, her sacrifice, was dismantling the Kingsleys brick by brick. Preston's defense was slick, painting Vance as a disgruntled employee. Amira's notes as fabrications, the hospital errors as tragic coincidence. But the evidence was a tidal wave, and the jury's faces, tight with outrage, told Ethan the tide had turned. Mercedes leaned close, her voice low. "They can't escape this." Ethan nodded, but his mind was on Eliza and Ella, their laughter a beacon guiding him through this storm. The trial's outcome would shape their future, not just his. As closing arguments loomed, the custody hearing for the twins unfolded in a smaller chamber. Ethan faced a judge, Mercedes at his side as social workers reviewed his case. His abandonment at the market was a scar, but his recent stability, Mercedes's job, the rebuilt cottage, his unwavering presence, spoke louder. Lena testified to his devotion, her voice fierce. Mercedes, a legal guardian contender, proposed a shared arrangement. Ethan as primary custodian, herself as guardian during his work hours, funding the twins' education. The judge, moved by their unlikely alliance, ruled in their favor. "You've earned a second chance, Mr. Caldwell," she said. "Don't waste it." Ethan's throat tightened, relief flooding him like sunlight. The criminal verdict came days later, the courtroom packed to its rafters. The jury foreman stood, voice steady. Guilty on all counts: fraud, conspiracy, and gross negligence. Preston's face drained of color, his empire crumbling as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Reporters swarmed, but Ethan's eyes were on Lena, her hand squeezing his, and Mercedes, her nod a silent, "We did it." Amira's shadow lingered, her justice bittersweet but hard-won. Ethan returned to the estate, the river now a mirror of hope rather than dread. The rebuilt guest cottage was home, its walls fresh with paint and promise. He found Eliza and Ella in the garden, their laughter a melody that drowned out the trial's echoes. Eliza, her blonde curls wild, painted a river scene on an easel, her fair hands smeared with blue. Ella, her brown skin glowing, twirled to a Cuban salsa tune from Mercedes's radio, her dark eyes bright. Ethan knelt, their small arms wrapping around him. "Daddy!" Eliza chirped, Ella echoing softer, her trust growing daily. Mercedes joined them, her linen dress catching the breeze. "They're your legacy," she said, her voice soft but weighted. "And Amira's." Ethan nodded, his gaze on the twins. The Kingsleys were broken, their threat neutralized, but the cost, Amira's life, his own guilt, would never fade. Yet here in this garden, with Eliza's paint-streaked fingers and Ella's shy smile, he found a purpose. He'd failed once, but never again. The river flowed on, its secrets buried, and Ethan vowed to build a future worthy of his daughter's light. The Ashley River glowed under a Charleston twilight, its surface a canvas of rose and gold, as if the city itself exhaled a quiet blessing. Ethan Caldwell stood on the porch of the rebuilt guest cottage, its fresh pine scent mingling with the magnolia-heavy air. 6 months had passed since the courtroom victory that toppled the Kingsley Empire. 6 months since justice for Amira's death carved a path forward for his twin daughters, Eliza and Ella. The estate of Mercedes del Toro, once a fortress against threats, now felt like a haven, its live oaks no longer whispering danger, but promise. Ethan's hands, still rough from his mechanic days, rested on the railing, his heart lighter than it had been in years. Yet the scars of his past, abandoning his girls at the Charleston market, losing Amira, lingered, a quiet ache beneath the joy of this new beginning. Inside the cottage, signs of life bloomed. A child's drawing of a river, smudged with Eliza's blue paint, hung on the fridge. Ella's tiny sneakers, scuffed from dancing, sat by the door. Ethan's logistics job at Del Toro Properties had become a career, his desk cluttered with shipping charts and a photo of the twins giggling in the garden. The custody arrangement, hard won in court, was a delicate balance. Ethan as primary guardian, Mercedes as caretaker during his work hours, her wealth ensuring the girls' education and safety. Each day, Ethan woke to their laughter, a melody that drowned out the guilt of that fateful market night. But tonight, as fireflies sparked in the dusk, he felt the weight of a promise unvoiced, a vow to never falter again. The twins burst from the mansion's back door, their sundresses fluttering like wings. Eliza, her blonde curls wild, chased a firefly, her fair skin flushed with glee. "Daddy, look!" she squealed, cupping her hands around a glowing speck. Ella, her brown skin radiant in the fading light, twirled after her sister, her dark eyes bright with mischief. "Mine's brighter," she declared, giggling as she stumbled into Ethan's legs. He knelt, scooping them into his arms, their warmth a tether to the present. "You're both brighter than any firefly," he said, his voice thick, kissing their foreheads. Their trust, hard-earned after months of cautious visits, was a gift he'd never take for granted. Mercedes emerged from the mansion, her linen dress catching the breeze, a faded photograph in her hand. Her silver hair gleamed under the porch light, her presence as commanding as ever, yet softened by the months of shared battles. She'd become more than an ally, a grandmother to the twins, her Cuban lullabies a nightly ritual. "They're relentless," she said, a rare smile curving her lips as Eliza darted past, Ella in pursuit. Ethan grinned, setting the girls down to resume their chase. "Just like their mother," he said, the words bittersweet. Amira's absence was a shadow, but her spirit lived in the twins' fierce joy. Mercedes joined him on the porch, her gaze on the river. "I've been meaning to give you this," she said, handing him the photograph. Ethan's breath caught as he studied it. A young Amira, her smile radiant, stood beside a woman with his own blue eyes, both laughing at a Charleston market stall. "Claire," he whispered, his mother's face sharp and vivid for the first time in years. "And Amira, they were friends?" Mercedes nodded, her voice soft. "Before you were born. Claire worked for me. Amira was her neighbor's daughter. They shared a fire, brave, stubborn. You've got it too, Ethan, in diving into this fight, in choosing the girls every day." The photo trembled in his hands, a bridge across time. Claire, gone when he was a child, had been a ghost in his memory, her stories lost to his distant father. Amira, his love, had carried that same fire, her notebook exposing the Kingsleys at the cost of her life. Ethan traced their faces, his throat tight. "I've failed them both," he said, the market knight's guilt surfacing. Mercedes' hand rested on his shoulder, firm but kind. "You failed once, but you're here now. That's what makes a father. Not perfection, but persistence." Eliza's squeal broke the moment, her firefly escaping into the dusk. Ella ran to Ethan, her small hand tugging his. "Daddy, help!" she pleaded, her trust a knife in a balm. He lifted her, pointing to a new glow near the riverbank. "There's another," he said, guiding her gaze. Eliza joined them, her paint-streaked fingers clutching his leg. "We're a team," she declared, and Ethan's heart swelled, the weight of his past easing under their light. Mercedes watched, her eyes distant but warm. "They're your legacy," she said, her voice weighted with years of loss. Her daughter Sophia, her battles with the Kingsleys, and Amira's. "Keep them close." Ethan nodded, the photograph now tucked into his pocket, a talisman of the women who'd shaped him. The Kingsleys were gone, their empire shattered, but Amira's absence lingered, a wound that would never fully heal. Yet here, with Eliza's laughter and Ella's dance, he found redemption, a chance to build what he'd once broken. The twins tired, their chase slowing, and Ethan carried them to the cottage, their heads heavy on his shoulders. Inside, he tucked them into their shared room, Eliza's easel by the window, Ella's radio humming softly. "Good night, my stars," he whispered, kissing their foreheads. Ella murmured, "Love you, Daddy," her voice sleepy but sure. Eliza echoed, her hand reaching for her sisters, their bond unbroken even in dreams. Ethan stepped outside, the river now a ribbon of starlight. Mercedes lingered on the porch, her silhouette a pillar against the night. "You're their father," she said, her tone final, a blessing. "That's enough." Ethan nodded, his vow silent but ironclad. He'd never leave them again. The market's shadows, the Kingsleys' threats, Amira's loss, they were his past, but Eliza and Ella were his future. As fireflies danced over the lawn, Ethan felt his family, fractured, fierce, reborn, take root, a circle he'd guard with his life. Thank you for journeying through the Twins of Charleston, a tale of loss, redemption, and unbreakable bonds. Ethan's fight for Eliza and Ella stirred your heart. Now share your thoughts. What would you have done in his shoes? Drop your reflections below. Your voice matters. Your time and emotions mean the world to us, so thank you for listening. Stay tuned for more stories that grip and inspire. We'll meet again by the river's edge, where new tales await.